Hi there. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles in Washington, and we start today with breaking news from the White House. Sources telling NBC News that President Trump is dropping the Justice Department's so-called anti-weaponization fund amid the backlash he was facing from members of his own party and after a federal judge blocked the administration from distributing any money from the fund. We'll have more on this breaking news in a moment, but it also comes as the high-stakes peace negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, which President Trump last week said were close to producing a deal, may be on life support. Today, state media reporting that Iranian negotiators say they're suspending talks with the U.S., citing Israel's expanding offensive into Lebanon against Iran's proxy Hezbollah. It comes after the U.S. and Iran also exchanged fire overnight. Tehran now threatening to once again close the Strait of Hormuz, that turmoil sending oil prices back above $90 a barrel. In a phone call this morning with NBC's Garrett Haake, the president says he was not informed of the latest decision by Iran to suspend the talks, but going on to say, quote, "I think it's fine if they're done talking. I would be very happy with that. I think it's okay. That's a good thing for them to say because they're good negotiators, but I don't really care. I really don't care." The president also saying, quote, "It doesn't mean we're going to go and start dropping bombs all over there. We'll just go silent. We'll keep the blockade." Now, that stands in stark contrast to what the president and the Secretary of Defense said just a few days ago. Take a listen.
They are starting to give us the things that they have to give us, and if they do, that's great. And if they won't, then the man on my left is going to finish them off.
I know he means it when he looks in the camera in the cabinet room and said they can either do this now through a deal, and we think we're in a good place to make that deal, or they can deal with the War Department. And we are prepared. We're postured even stronger today than we were on day one to address it that way if we have to, but he'd prefer not to. So Iran knows very, very clearly what our expectations are.
Now, this afternoon, the president posting on social media that, quote, "talks are continuing at a rapid pace with Iran." The president also saying he spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and with Hezbollah, claiming both sides have agreed to de-escalate. The whiplash in headlines comes as support for the president continues to hemorrhage here at home due to the economic fallout of the war. Joining me now, our team of reporters covering all the angles, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Mel Zanona, NBC News Chief White House correspondent Garrett Haake, NBC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel is in Tel Aviv. Also with me, our NBC News Senior National Security Correspondent Courtney Kube and NBC News Business and Economic reporter Allie Canal. Mel, I'm going to start with you because you have the breaking news about the president's anti-weaponization fund. What more can you tell us about this? There seems to be not a whole lot of clarity exactly how this is coming to an end, but how did we get to this point?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There had been so much backlash on Capitol Hill from Republicans. They had been privately and publicly urging President Trump to either drop this fund or put some sort of guardrails or restrictions on it. And Ryan, as you know, it had become such a political problem for Republicans that they were even willing to blow up a completely unrelated immigration bill in order to get some of these things done. So this is going to be a huge relief for both Senate GOP leader John Thune as well as Speaker Mike Johnson, who was meeting with President Trump at the White House today. But that being said, Ryan, Democrats are still vowing to make this an issue for Republicans. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, said they're going to force votes this week on proposals to restrict this fund or similar funds from coming back in the future. And to your point on the clarity issue, Republicans might want some more ironclad commitments from the administration that they're not going to change their minds and appeal this court ruling after this immigration bill is already signed. So while there could be some relief today, these headaches not going away quite yet for Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. It also comes as we see the war with Iran becoming a political liability for this president. We have the House back tomorrow. They're probably not going to vote for a couple of days. They're going to have to vote on a war powers resolution that they pushed to after the recess. We saw a war powers resolution advance in the Senate to curb the president's ability to continue the war. Do we think there'll be similar movement in the House?
We are expecting similar movement in the House. In fact, before the recess break, House GOP leaders had to pull a war powers resolution from the floor because they knew it would have succeeded. So they're hoping this week that attendance will be better on their side, but they can't put off this vote forever because of procedural reasons. And so it is going to come to a floor vote, and it is very likely that it is going to succeed, even though this would be a symbolic vote because it's not the exact same measure that the Senate passed, and Trump, of course, could always veto it. This would be an embarrassing defeat for the president, and one that GOP leaders are very clearly trying to avoid here.
And finally, Congress also needs to pass this reconciliation bill, that immigration bill you were talking about before. Is there a possibility that they can get it done now?
That's the hope, especially now that this DOJ fund apparently is being dropped. They think the process will go much smoother in the Senate. They're hoping to kick off the so-called vote-a-rama, which would be an unlimited number of amendments being offered throughout the night on Wednesday night. They would pass that Thursday, and then it would kick it over to the House, which still needs to pass it themselves. And then it would put an end to what has become one of the longest stalemates over immigration funding in our history. Ryan.
All right, Melanie Zanona with the breaking news. Mel, we appreciate that. Let's go to the White House now. Garrett, you had a phone conversation with the president today. He had doubled down on this fund. What's the latest from the White House? Are they explaining exactly what the future of this fund is like?
They're not, Ryan, and neither did the president when I spoke to him earlier today, although I had some reporting that over the weekend, the White House was looking for an exit strategy here, that it had started to become clear to them the depth of their problem here, particularly with Senate Republicans as related to this fund, and that they thought perhaps that the judge's initial ruling kind of putting a delay on this and punting further decisions a few weeks out might have opened the door for that. And through that open door today came this other DOJ statement, which essentially says that they will abide by the judge's ruling, and talks about the fund in the past tense. That's about as much clarity as we have on this right now. Perhaps we'll hear more from the president on his social media later today. But I do think this was a situation where the White House didn't realize exactly how deep the water they were swimming in was around this fund until Congress had already left town, and they needed to find something like a graceful exit. In this case, they may have gotten it from the judges who have ruled on this case.
All right, let's talk about your phone conversation with the president. He said last week that he's not concerned about the impact this war could have on the midterms. But with oil prices back up today, does he feel any pressure to resume talks and get a deal with Iran?
Well, let me put it this way, Ryan. I think lack of clarity is an emerging theme across all of these storylines today, because the president wasn't totally clear on that between what he told me and what he's posted on social media subsequently. But at least in our phone conversation, he seemed to suggest that his patience is almost unlimited. I'll show you a quote. When I asked him about the idea of waiting out Iran, he said, "I think I can wait as long as they want," suggesting that Iran has sort of a harder economic hand to play here than he does. The money they're losing because of the blockade, their inflation. He says if they don't want to talk, it's fine, and insisted to me that the U.S. could just keep this blockade up indefinitely, and that when Iran was good and ready, they'd come to the table. He also said he's not interested in resuming bombing. That works in June politically, but probably doesn't work as well in September or October. I think the White House thinks they still have a little bit of time to try to sort this out, and they understand that it takes time. Just even getting messages back and forth to the Iranian decision makers is a multi-day process. So I think they've pretty much given up on the idea that there's going to be some swift solution to this, even if those rumors and reports pop up every few days or so.
And of course, there's the Lebanon of all of this as well. That's an ongoing problem. Iran said that they had paused the talks because of Israel's operation there. We know the president talked with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. What more do we know about that call?
Yeah, lack of clarity part 3. Here, President Trump, in his readout of the call, says that he talked to Netanyahu and that there'd be no IDF forces in Beirut, that any such efforts would be turned around, and that he even, through representatives, spoke with Hezbollah and that things would be calming down. Prime Minister Netanyahu subsequently put out a statement that says Israel's going to keep defending itself, and if they have to strike Beirut because that's where the terrorists, as he describes them, are operating, then that's what they're going to do. Tell me what the truth is in between there, and you'll have quite the story. I do think the call itself is interesting, regardless of what was discussed, because it does suggest that despite what the president told me about not really caring about Iran's concerns here, he wanted to at least feel out Israel to see what, if anything, could be done to address those concerns.
Okay, Garrett Haake from what appears to be a very opaque White House North Lawn today. Not much clarity on a number of topics, but we appreciate you trying to get to the bottom of it, Garrett. Let's move overseas now and bring Richard Engel in. Richard, as we mentioned, Iran signaling it is suspending talks because of the Israeli military operations in Lebanon. It was Israel's deepest incursion into Lebanon in 26 years. How significant of an escalation was that? So Israel has been steadily increasing its military activity in southern Lebanon in particular over the last week or so, ordering new evacuation orders almost daily, telling Lebanese civilians that they should leave their homes, leave their towns, head north, get out of the south for their own safety, because the Israeli military is operating there, fighting there against Hezbollah. And Israel is continuing to advance to the north. Capturing a castle that you showed on the screen a short while ago, taking a very strategic piece of territory, keeping the pressure on Hezbollah, which is a militia group backed by Iran, a group the United States considers it a terrorist organization. But things almost escalated much further this morning when Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he was going to begin attacks in Beirut, starting to attack Hezbollah stronghold called the neighborhood of Dahieh, which is in South Lebanon. That call was likely what triggered Iran to say enough is enough. As long as Israel is continuing its advance in Lebanon and now openly attacking or openly planning to attack a large section of Beirut, then there was no point in having conversations. This was put out by the Iranian state news agencies. It was also stressed by the Iranian foreign minister. Over the last several days, Iran has increasingly been focused on Lebanon, saying it must be part of an overall peace deal. Then, before the strikes on the southern suburb of Dahieh began, because today there were not major strikes in Beirut, although many of us were anticipating that they could come at any moment, we heard about this breakthrough. There was a call between President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, communications directly with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah now, according to Hezbollah media, says it will abide by a ceasefire. It will stop shooting as long as Israel stops shooting on Lebanese territory. And I'm emphasizing that because it's important. Because there's a distinction, there's a discrepancy. Prime Minister Netanyahu just put out a statement a short while ago saying that for now, there won't be operations against Dahieh. There won't be these bombings against Beirut, but that Israeli troops would continue to act in southern Lebanon, would continue their offensive there as normal. That was not what Hezbollah agreed to. So it is very possible that this I don't know if you want to call it a ceasefire, that word is being overused these days, if this temporary agreement even survives the night. Prime Minister Netanyahu also said that if Hezbollah fires over the border into Israel at civilians living in northern Israel, then he would resume his intended plan and carry out a bombing campaign in Beirut itself.
And you mentioned that phone call between the president and the prime minister. Does it seem as though President Trump is able to exact any sort of leverage over Prime Minister Netanyahu? Or does it appear that Netanyahu is more worried about his own political standing in Israel? How much influence does President Trump have?
I think yes and both. The president has a lot of influence over Israel, has a lot of influence over Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu does face elections in the fall. Israeli politics are an aggressive sport. Netanyahu is an expert at it, who's managed to keep himself at the forefront of Israeli politics for several decades now. Some people have counted him out. Many Israelis are not. They call him the magician here because of his ability to form coalitions and stay in power. But the war in Lebanon is proving to be a sensitive point. The people in this country remember their long history in Lebanon. Israel occupied southern Lebanon for many years. I was on hand when Israeli troops ultimately decided that holding South Lebanon wasn't worth it and pulled out. Now Israeli forces are back in southern Lebanon, and because of the fact that they're setting up new positions on mountaintops where old strategic castles are positioned, it looks like they are going to be there for some time. So President Trump has enormous amount of influence over Prime Minister Netanyahu, but he operates according to his own agenda, and he does face this election coming up in the fall.
Okay, Richard Engel, thanks for being on top of it. We appreciate it. Stay safe. Let's now turn to Courtney Kube, who, if there's a reporter that has whiplash the most, it may be Courtney Kube, as she goes back and forth thinking that we've got a deal and maybe not.
Let's talk first about what the U.S. military is actually doing, because sometimes that's more important than what the president says. And they launched more strikes on Iranian targets over the weekend. Talk to me about what was targeted, and can we officially say that the ceasefire no longer exists?
So this was another case where the U.S. military claims that they were having threatening actions from, in this case, Iranian drones. They were launching them out of this little island that's sort of at the beginning of the Strait of Hormuz and from the Persian Gulf, known as Qasem Island. And then they were also launching them from a place called Garruk, which is on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, almost to the Gulf of Oman. Because of that, the U.S. hit these radar sites, command and control sites. So basically, the places where they would launch these drones out of. Now, the U.S. is calling these self-defense, but as you mentioned, this has been going on, this back and forth between what is primarily the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and the U.S. military for several weeks now. This back and forth, this continued escalation, which gets to the question about the ceasefire. The reality is, there is no ceasefire. Both sides, the militaries are continuing to fire at one another, whether it is self-defense as they claim or whatever it is. This is really more at this point of a pause in major combat operations and hostilities. But as these two sides continue to operate in such close proximity to one another, there are these continued tit-for-tat escalations that seem to blow up every few days into the kinds of strikes we saw the U.S. military take over the weekend.
And then in some other great reporting that you had over the weekend, it's that the Pentagon has not confirmed that Iran placed mines in the Strait of Hormuz, despite what the administration officials, including a top general, have said. What have you learned about this?
Yeah, so we've been hearing from early on, frankly, for years, actually. There's always been the sense that one of Iran's main threats to the Strait of Hormuz would be potentially mines. There's several different kinds of them that they can use. There have been multiple reports throughout the course of the war, so these 90 days or so, including during the ceasefire, of times where Iran was either seen placing new mines or there were mines that were spotted somewhere in the waterways there, all the way down towards the Gulf of Oman. At this point, the U.S. military on multiple occasions has sent out underwater drones, robots, surveillance aircraft, all these different things. They have not positively identified any mines in any of these cases. President Trump went on Truth Social the other day and said, look, we've been blowing up these mines. Officials explained, we don't know if they're mines, actually. There have been occasions where they have blown up things that could be mines. They look like it, but at this point, there's still no concrete evidence that Iran has actually mined the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, that's an important detail. All right, thank you, Courtney. We appreciate it. Let's talk about how this is impacting your bottom line. We bring in Allie Canal for more on that. Allie, first, let's talk about the oil markets. How are they reacting to where things stand in these negotiations with Iran?
Yeah, well, obviously, Ryan, a lot of back and forth when it comes to these negotiations. But if you just zero in on the oil market here, these traders clearly don't expect a resolution anytime soon. U.S. crude oil briefly neared $95 a barrel today. It's since pulled back a bit. We're trading at just around that $92 a barrel range. But prior to today, investors had actually been pricing in the possibility of some sort of a diplomatic breakthrough here. That helped oil drop below $90 a barrel at certain points over the past 2 weeks. Now we're back up again. And as a reminder here, this all centers on the Strait of Hormuz, something that we've been talking about throughout the entire program. It's that critical waterway essentially been shut down. We're lucky to see just one or two ships get through. And at one point prior to this war, 20% of the world's oil supply moved through it every single day. So it really is critical that we get the strait reopened and operating again.
You mentioned it reopening. There's a chance now that Iran may actually move to completely close the Strait of Hormuz. If they actually follow through on that, what could that mean for the price of gas?
Yeah, it's likely that gas prices are going to go higher. So oil and gas very closely correlated. A good rule of thumb is that for every $1 move in crude, that translates to about 2 to 3 cents a gallon at the pump here. So if you take a look at the national average for gas, we're at $4.32 a gallon. Now, over the past few weeks, drivers actually saw a bit of relief at the pump due to the fact that oil prices were falling on hopes of a breakthrough in these negotiations. But it's also important to keep that relief in perspective. Despite these recent declines, gas, it's still up around 45% from where we were pre-war when the national average was firmly below $3 a gallon.
And then finally, we also saw Treasury yields go up. What does that mean for the average consumer?
It means your borrowing costs are going to go up. So the 10-year Treasury yield, it's a pretty good benchmark when you look at things like mortgage rates. Also affects other types of borrowing costs, like the loan you pay on your car, credit card debt, things like that. And it's also important when we look ahead to inflation expectations. So traders essentially thinking, okay, if oil keeps going up, that means inflation is going to go higher. And if inflation goes higher, it's going to be very difficult for the Fed to cut interest rates. So it's all centers on those expectations. And it shows that this isn't just an oil story. Everything is very interconnected when we think about the economy. It affects inflation, interest rates, and ultimately what consumers are paying.
This despite President Trump almost demanding that the Fed cut interest rates. Allie, thanks so much for that.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.